So here we have the two rib frames on their Maltese crosses. This is a half size base and this is a 1/8 size base, and the size of the body isn't proportional to the size of the instrument. The size is dependent on the actual vibrating string length, which I mean you can't see it now because the scroll's not in, but the vibrating string length denotes the size of the bass. So a half size bass would have a 38-inch vibrating string length, which is called the string stop, and an 1/8 size bass has a 32-inch string stop, and that is reflected in bridge height, string angle and all the rest of it. And so there we are. That's hot, very hot. So I dangle the wood. You don't want this to have a memory so that it will distort the rib on which it is to be glued. So we got to take all the spring out of the wood, just easing it round, and it bends because it's a very thin strip. One lining bent and fitted. When it's dry, that will be glued. There, see? There you go. Once they're dry, they can be glued in about 2 or 3 hours time. I think after that little lining bending session, it's time for a snifter. Yeah, I can do this all day, no problem. God, you must think I'm a right old soak. Oh dear. Well, you're probably right, actually. I first started playing in the Air Force because I was told to play, because the sergeant heard me play in the NAFI. I used to play the piano, you see, and I used to play not very to high band standard or anything like that, but he said to me, "You're a musical lad, there's a double bass in the sergeant's mess and you're going to play it, aren't you?" And you didn't argue. "Yes, Sergeant." And I got this bass. Apparently they were having a dance in a fortnight's time or 3 weeks' time. He said all the girls from Barry Island, because I was at St Athan, South Wales, and they're all coming up for the dance. He said, "But you won't be with them, you're going to be on the stand playing, aren't you?" "Yes, Sergeant." And I got this bass. It was the most awful box you could imagine. The bow had 3 hairs on it. And there was an ancient tutor by a bloke called A.C. White, published by Novellos, and incredibly they still publish it, I do believe, and it was all in semi-breves and breves, but I got stuck in, and the strings were awful gut things, all hairy, and they made my fingers so sore. But I thought, I don't know, I like this instrument. And so after a few weeks I did the dance, very badly of course, and but he had eyes like a gimlet, this sergeant, and he had his eye on me all the time, you know, and not bad, Beddingfield, not bad. the first effort, you know, after this concert. And I don't know, I thought, and I took the bass back to the mess and I went to Cardiff and I bought, from the music shop, there was a bass for sale for 12 quid. 12 quid, can you imagine it? And it was a German trade box, a blockless wonder as we call them. And I bought it, took it back to the camp, and I bought a bass tutor and taught myself. And then when I got demobbed, I sent the bass home by train, which arrived in 2 pieces because they broke it. And I never did repair it. I wasn't into that side of it at that time. And I sold it to a friend of mine who knew somebody who would repair it, which they did, but I never saw it again. And then I went to work in chapels in Bond Street in the early 50s. And I was there for about 18 months, and then I passed an audition to get on the Queen Elizabeth, the liner. And I was on there for 9 months, going backwards and forwards to New York. And we used to get down in Birdland. And I believe that's all gone now, but you used to have all the big bands like Benny Goodman, Woody Herman, Stan Getz, and loads of other people whom I can't remember. And then I wanted to cast my net further afield, and so I passed an audition to get on the Orchidees, which went to Australia and went up the Pacific to Vancouver and down through the Panama Canal. So I did 3 or 4 trips on that. At one time I knew more people in Sydney than I did in London. And then I went, after a brief interval, I then got asked to go on the maiden voyage of the new liner, the Oriana. That was in 1960-61. And I did the maiden voyage on that, and my godfathers, what a trip that was. And we did cruises from Sydney, all round the Pacific Islands, you know. And it went from here through Aden, Colombo, all round Australia, New Zealand, Fiji Islands, Honolulu, Yokohama, Osaka, Vancouver, San Francisco, and back through the Panama Canal. And I think I did 3 trips on that. And all it was a 5-piece, alto, tenor, piano, bass and drums. Amplification wasn't an option. No amplification. And there's only there's only 2 of us still alive now, and that's Tony, the tenor player. He lives in Las Vegas, and the others are all dead, I'm afraid. But it was a lovely time, you know, really was a good trips, good music. And there you go. I could add a lot, but it might bore you. I need no second bidding. Oh, plus, that's nice, isn't it? I did a summer season in Jersey, and that's when I met my wife, Gwen. She was a chaperone. She worked at Dr. Bernardo's in Stepney, and she was a chaperone to the fiancé of a pianist I knew, and she had no eyes and she was a hunchback. And he said, would you mind taking her off my hands for a week so I can be with G? And that was his fiancée. And I said, oh, well, all right then. And so that's what happened. That's how I met her. If you put your front teeth on the edge, you can feel every little tremor. and there's none at all. But when I was in Jersey, I met her, came back, and after 9 months we got married, and then we moved to Romford, and that's when we were there in 1970, and I worked at the 55, which was a jazz restaurant in Jermyn Street, and that was a terrific gig musically, and then I got the sack from the job because I wouldn't do Sundays, you see, and I moved to the Hilton in Park Lane, and I worked there for about a year, and then I took a day job because we'd have ended up in the divorce court, you know, Gwen didn't like me being a professional, and so if you can't fight them, join them. So I went into computer accountancy with insurance, and actually, believe it or not, I quite liked it. It's just one of those things, and so I moved firm, and I got to be manager of a small department, the reinsurance department, a now defunct brokers. And then I moved down here to be with C.E. Heaths, who used to be in Victoria Avenue. Then Gwen fell ill with cancer, and I didn't know this at the time. She didn't tell me. And then I used to spend quite a lot of time looking after her, and in the end my director called me in, and obviously they knew that they were going to move to, they were going to amalgamate and move to Swindon, but nobody knew that except the directors. And he said, have you ever thought, because I was taking so much time off, and they were very, very good to me, Heaths. I can't knock Heaths at all, they were brilliant. And he said, have you ever thought of taking early retirement? I said, oh no, not really. He said, I'll get you a few figures, and the figures were amazing because it was a very good pension scheme. It was non-contributory, and I got the down payment which everybody is entitled to, the payment tax-free, you know. And that's what built this conservatory, because I built this so that Gwen could do her art. But unbeknown to me, of course, she had the big C. And the day this conservatory was finished, she died, which was a bit of a kick in the bollocks, not to put too fine a point on it. And there you go, one has to move on, and here I am making bases and clocks. Cheers. I need no second bidding. I've got the scroll here which I've semi-prepared for the 8th size base. I'm drawing the lines from the patterns I've got around the scroll, and I've put preliminary saw cuts in, and now I'm just trimming the sides of the peg box. It's just slightly curved, you see. The wood the front is made from is quarter sawn pine, which this is. And it's cut on the quarter so that you get nice straight grain top to bottom. You saw the ribs earlier when I knocked the mould out. Well, this is now the ribs with the linings all in and the back actually glued on. Transverse bars are now in place. That's the main transverse bar that takes the pressure of the sound post, and these are the sub bars to stop it moving. And you've got a centre cross grain stud up the middle to reinforce the centre joint. So if I turn that round, you can see the back has been double purfled. The lines round here have been inlaid, and I lay my own little rope design on the top and put an ebony crown on the button, as you'll see on the finished article. Well, I quote 4 to 5 months. Yeah. If I worked from 9 till 6, which I'm not going to, I'd get through too many bottles of whiskey. You understand me? And I worked 7 days a week, I could make a base in 3 weeks. If you really pushed it, which at my time of life I don't intend to do. But they've still got to be made, you know. I went into clocks. I wanted to make a clock, so I made a grandfather clock in 2000. And that is now with Derek and Sandra next door, because it was made in mahogany and it went with their decor, so they bought it. But all the other clocks I've made are in oak or ebony. And the last grandfather clock I made was about 9 years ago now, 9 and 7 years ago. And I made it for a bloke called John the Parrot. They called him a parrot. They called him John the Parrot because I know a lot of Johns, and he had this parrot. It was an African grey, and it was in a cage in his living room. And every time you walk, when I walked through the door, the first thing it said was "fuck off." I couldn't believe it. And I said to John, you know, I said, where did it learn that language? Oh, it's my son, he said, he's always telling it to fuck off. And of course, anything short and sharp, they pick up in a trice. Oh dear. He used to work at the nursery, which is now being turned into a housing estate along the arterial here. And Cottage Garden Nursery it was. He used to work there, and I had Tony, he was the boss, and John, they came round here to do some gardening work. And Tony said, do you mind showing John your clocks and your bases? I said, no, not at all. He came in, and he was a person less liable, you'd think, to want a grandfather clock you couldn't imagine. He was a very thin, grizzled little man with a sharp cockney wit, you know. And he came in, he said, God mate, he says, this grandfather clock, that's bloody awesome. He said, how much do they go for? And I forget how much I told him, about 3,000 or 4,000 quid. I'll have one, he said. And of course I often get people say that. Lots of people are attracted with the grandfather clock and they asked how much it is. I didn't think anything more of it. 9:30 the next morning there was a knock at the door and it was him. Here you are, mate, he said, I got your deposit for that clock. And it was 1,000 quid all in fivers. Oh, I couldn't believe it. I said, do you mind if I check this? Yeah, he said, I'm terrible with money, I might have made a mistake. And it took me ages to count, what, all those fivers. And of course, he was looking round while I was doing this, and he saw the little carriage clock, which you see there on the side. He said, while I'm about it, I'll have one of those as well. I said, well, okay. And it kind of took me aback, because he was so direct. And I said, wouldn't you like to bring your wife round and have a look at the clock? Because he told me he'd had children with the story of the parrot, I said, bring your wife round and let her look at the clock. No, he said, she buggered off years ago. Oh dear, there's no answer to that, is there? Oh dear. And so there you go. And he turned out to be a good client because he saw the globe, and I'll have one of those as well. He was up front with everything. No half-larks, I thought I could do with a few more like you, mate, and some of the bloody fly-by nights I've had. And today I'm here. 28 inches in diameter. Because anything more and it wouldn't go through your doors. Think about it. I wanted to make a 36-inch globe, but I couldn't get it out of the bloody workshop. So there you go. The root design, he wanted that on the legs of his globe. And I says, John, if I put this on the legs of your globe, it's going to be 150 quid per leg more. I don't care about that. He says, that's what I want. Well, this is the globe I made, John. And it's electrified like the globe I have here. That's why you've got a very thick meridian, because that houses the motor which drives the globe. And it's a 21-inch globe with the inlay that matches the grandfather clock that I made him. And he was over the moon because the actual label on the globe says Johan Beddingfield's Globe of the World, made for John Tucker Esquire. And he was over the moon with that. He really was. He burst with pride. And it was a giveaway, He was hooked.